Commander Zeidelvax's crystalline appendages twitched with barely contained irritation as he reviewed the medical scans for the fifth time. The holographic displays floating before him showed readings that simply couldn't be possible, yet there they were, the baseline biological data for the 5 human soldiers standing at attention in his office. These readings must be incorrect. He chittered, his translucent exoskeleton flashing warning patterns of disbelief. No sentient species could naturally possess such aggressive biological functions. First Lieutenant Raj Kumar kept his face carefully neutral, though the corner of his mouth threatened to twitch into a smile. The readings are accurate, Commander. Standard human biological functions, nothing unusual for our species. Behind him, Private First Class Camilla Ghost Raj shifted almost imperceptibly, fighting back her own amusement. The other members of their elite unit, Sergeant Thomas Tank Williams, Corporal Naomi Storm Tanaka, and Private First Class Victor Ice Petrov, maintained their professional composure with varying degrees of success. Nothing unusual. The alien commander's voice rose an octave. Your cellular structure actively repairs radiation damage. Your skeletal system contains metals that should be toxic. Your digestive system. He paused, mandibles clicking rapidly. Your digestive system is practically a chemical weapons factory. Basic human biology, sir, Tank offered helpfully, his deep voice carefully controlled. Though I understand it might seem a bit robust compared to galactic standard. The commander's crystalline form flickered with patterns that the humans had learned indicated extreme agitation. Robust. Your species evolved on a death world so hostile that most galactic races would consider it uninhabitable. You call that merely robust? Earth does have its challenges, Raj acknowledged diplomatically, but we've adapted quite well. Adapted? Zeidelvax's translator somehow managed to convey both incredulity and exasperation. Your species treats potentially lethal environments as vacation destinations. You deliberately consume substances that should be toxic for entertainment. You expose yourselves to radiation for aesthetic purposes. The tanning salon incident was just one time. Sir, Ghost murmured, earning a subtle elbow from Storm. The commander's crystalline form pulsed with determination. Very well. Since you insist on downplaying your species' rather unique characteristics, perhaps a practical demonstration is in order. He manipulated some controls on his console, bringing up a holographic display of a planet that looked like it had been designed by a committee of sadists. This, he announced with what might have been satisfaction, is Terminus X. The galactic military considers it one of the most hostile environments in known space. 3 solar systems worth of radiation, tectonic instability that would shake most planets apart, atmospheric pressure variations that could crush a battle cruiser, and some of the most aggressive indigenous life forms ever catalogued. I studied the rotating hologram with professional interest. Looks cozy. Reminds me of summer in Siberia, but with better weather. The commander's exoskeleton flickered rapidly. You will be dropped onto the surface with minimal survival gear. Your objective is to reach the extraction point on the other side of the Devastation Mountains, within 3 planetary rotations. No support, no advanced technology, just your robust biology, and whatever you can scavenge. Sounds like a nice workout, Tank rumbled, earning nods from his teammates. The environment is rated as lethal for 98% of known species, Zeidelvax continued, clearly expecting some reaction other than the eager anticipation he was getting. The atmospheric composition alone reminds me of Los Angeles rush hour, Ghost interjected cheerfully, just with better visibility. The commander's crystalline form dimmed slightly in what might have been defeat. Report to Drop Bay 7 at 600 local time tomorrow. Try not to die. The paperwork would be excessive. As the human team filed out of the commander's office, their measured military stride lasted exactly until they were out of visual range. Then the grins they'd been suppressing broke free. Did you see his face when he was reading our medical scans? Storm chuckled, her normally serious demeanor cracking. I thought his crystals were going to shatter. The chemical weapons factory comment was new, Raj mused, leading them toward their quarters. Usually they just fixate on our bone density or endurance. Speaking of which, Tank rumbled, pulling up the planetary data on his datapad. Anyone else thinking this Terminus X might actually be interesting? Those atmospheric pressure variations could make things spicy. I studied the readings over Tank's shoulder. The radiation levels are pretty impressive. Might actually need to break out the sunscreen for this one. All right, team, fun aside. Raj called their attention back to business. This is clearly meant to be some kind of object lesson. They're expecting us to either back down or fail spectacularly. So we do what humans do best. Ghost grinned. We adapt, we survive, and we make it look easy enough to really freak them out. The next morning found them in Drop Bay 7, checking their minimal gear as their alien instructors looked on with what could only be described as morbid curiosity. Their equipment had been restricted to basic survival tools. No powered devices, no advanced technology, just simple mechanical implements, and whatever they could carry on their backs. Final chance to reconsider, Commander Zidlevax announced as they boarded the dropship. The environmental conditions alone are a lovely challenge, Raj interrupted smoothly. We appreciate your concern, Commander, but we're actually looking forward to this. The commander's crystalline form pulsed with patterns that probably indicated he questioned their sanity. The extraction point is 1,000 kilometers across the Devastation Mountains. The route crosses 3 different climate zones, each rated as lethal to most sentient life. You have 3 rotations to reach it. Plenty of time for sightseeing then. Tank commented as he settled into his crash harness. The others nodded in agreement, their expressions suggesting they were heading for a pleasant hike rather than what the Galactic military considered a death sentence. As the dropship lifted off, Raj could see the commander's form flickering with what he'd learned to recognize as utter bewilderment. The human's casual approach to what should have been a terrifying ordeal clearly challenged everything the alien officer thought he knew about survival and adaptation. Little did the commander know, but this was exactly the kind of challenge that humans lit for. As the dropship carried them toward their insertion point, Raj looked at his team and saw not fear or concern, but excitement and anticipation. They were about to show the galaxy exactly why humans had not just survived, but thrived on their supposed death world. The real question wasn't whether they would survive Terminus X. The question was how many of the galaxy's preconceptions about impossible survival scenarios they would break along the way. The dropship's bay doors opened to reveal what the aliens considered hell incarnate. Terminus X stretched below them, a vista of twisted landscapes and atmospheric chaos that would have sent most galactic species into panic attacks. 3 suns painted the sky in overlapping shades of red and purple, their combined radiation enough to cook most organic matter. Now that's a view, Ghost whistled appreciatively, checking her jump harness. Reminds me of that time we went camping in Death Valley during a heat wave. The dropship pilot, a gelatinous being safely encased in multiple layers of protective shielding, burbled something that their translators rendered as pure disbelief. The surface temperature is approaching 400 degrees Kelvin. The radiation levels air. Perfect tanning weather. Ice interrupted with a grin, adjusting his pack. Though we might actually need the sunscreen this time. Raj performed one final equipment check, noting with satisfaction that his team was ready. Remember, we're being monitored. Let's show them exactly what humans can do. He stepped to the edge of the bay door, took a deep breath of the ship's atmosphere, and jumped. The others followed without hesitation, their bodies cutting through the superheated air with practiced precision. The planet's higher-than-standard gravity tugged at them more firmly than Earth's, but after years of training in variable gravity environments, it felt more invigorating than challenging. They landed in what appeared to be a valley of crystalline formations, their boots crunching on ground that seemed to be a mix of metallic deposits and some form of organic crystal. The air was thick, heavy with various gases that their alien observers probably assumed would be toxic to organic life. Atmospheric analysis coming in, Storm announced, consulting their basic chemical detector. High concentrations of sulfur compounds, metallic particulates, and, interesting, some sort of naturally occurring stimulant gas. No wonder the air feels so invigorating, Tank chuckled, taking deep breaths. It's like mainlining espresso. In the distance, massive geological formations rose like the spine of some ancient beast, their surfaces reflecting the triple sunlight in ways that created natural prismatic displays. The Devastation Mountains lived up to their name, their peaks disappearing into clouds that crackled with constant electrical activity. Temperature holding steady at about 130 Celsius, Ice reported, already removing his outer thermal layer. Bit warm, but nothing we can't handle. The radiation's actually less than that time we had to clean up that reactor breach on Mars. Ghost was already scouting ahead, her trained eyes taking in their surroundings. We've got some interesting flora developing in these conditions. Those crystal formations, they're actually some kind of silicon-based plant life, and they're growing fast. I can literally watch them expanding. The team spread out in a standard search pattern, gathering data about their environment while keeping alert for any potential threats. What they found consistently surprised them, not because it was too hostile, but because it reminded them so much of Earth's more extreme environments. You know what this reminds me of? Storm mused as they began their trek toward the distant mountains. That underwater volcano we had to investigate last year. Same kind of mineral formations, similar energy patterns. At least here, we don't have to worry about water pressure, Tank pointed out. Though I'm betting those clouds up ahead pack quite a punch. Those lightning strikes are carrying some serious energy. Raj consulted their basic compass, which was struggling with the planet's complex magnetic field. The extraction point is approximately 1,000 kilometers in that direction. We got 3 local days to cover the distance, crossing what they consider 3 lethal climate zones. Should we tell them that this is actually pretty comfortable compared to some of our training runs? Ghost asked, easily keeping pace despite the increasing gravity. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to shake. The crystalline formations around them vibrated in harmony, creating an otherworldly chorus of tones that would have been beautiful if it wasn't a warning of imminent danger. Tectonic activity incoming, Storm warned, her geologist background coming in handy. Big one, judging by these vibrations. The landscape around them began to transform as massive plates of the planet's crust shifted and collided. What had been a relatively flat valley suddenly began to fold like paper, creating new hills and chasms with frightening speed. The crystalline flora responded to the changes by rapidly growing and adapting, their structures flowing like liquid metal. Now this is interesting, Ice observed, maintaining his balance despite the moving ground. The entire ecosystem is designed to adapt to constant geological changes. Reminds me of those resilient bacteria we found in the Mariana Trench. Less analyzing, more moving, Raj ordered, though his voice carried more excitement than concern. Let's get to higher ground before. A massive fissure opened directly in their path, belching forth a combination of superheated gases and molten minerals that would have instantly killed most galactic species. The humans reacted with practiced efficiency, quickly adjusting their route while taking readings of the new phenomenon. The gas composition is actually improving the air quality, Storm noted as they navigated around the fissure. Higher oxygen content, though it's being delivered in a rather dramatic fashion. Leave it to Terminus X to turn a lethal volcanic event into an air freshener, Ghost laughed, already adapting her movement to take advantage of the shifting terrain. In the observation center orbiting high above, Commander Gotzelvax and his team watched in stunned silence as the humans not only survived, but seemed to be actively enjoying conditions that should have killed them several times over. The humans' vital signs showed elevated activity levels, but nothing approaching distress. Instead, their neurological readings indicated excitement and engagement, as if they were on some sort of pleasure excursion, rather than fighting for survival. "They're treating it like a park," one of the alien scientists muttered in disbelief. "They're treating the Class X Deathworld like some sort of recreational facility." Back on the surface, the human team had found their rhythm. They moved across the constantly changing landscape with fluid efficiency, treating lethal obstacles as mere inconveniences. When the gravity fluctuations began, causing their weight to vary between 2 and 4 times Earth normal, they adjusted their pace accordingly, treating it as little more than a variable resistance workout. "You know," Tank commented as they scaled a newly formed cliff face, their bodies easily adapting to the increased gravitational pull, "I'm starting to think our alien friends might have slightly overestimated the challenges of this place." "Or underestimated us," Raj replied, reaching the top and surveying the transformed landscape ahead. "Though I have a feeling this is just the warm-up. Those mountains ahead, they're called the Devastation Range for a reason." The team paused briefly at the summit, taking in the view of their objective. The mountain range loomed ahead, its peaks periodically illuminated by massive lightning strikes that made Earth's most violent storms look like static electricity in comparison. The air was thick with swirling metallic particles that created strange optical effects, making distance and depth perception tricky at best. "Well," Ice said with a grin, checking his basic equipment one more time, "at least it won't be boring. Shall we show our observers what humans consider a pleasant hike?" As they began their descent into the next valley, the planet seemed to take their casual confidence as a challenge. The temperature began to rise even further, the radiation levels increased, and the very air seemed to thicken with what should have been lethal compounds. The humans responded by removing more layers of protective gear, their bodies already adapting to conditions that their alien observers couldn't believe they were surviving, let alone treating as a mild inconvenience. They were about to redefine what the galaxy considered possible, one impossible survival scenario at a time. The first sign that they weren't alone came when Ghost spotted unusual movement patterns in the crystalline vegetation. Something large was shadowing them, using the constantly shifting terrain as cover. Instead of concern, the human team's reaction was one of professional interest. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Ghost reported, her trained eyes tracking subtle disturbances in the alien flora. "Big. Maybe 4 meters at the shoulder. Multiple contacts." Finally, Tank rumbled, adjusting his grip on his basic survival knife. "I was starting to think this was just going to be a scenic hike." The local predators revealed themselves gradually, massive creatures that seemed to be a hybrid of crystalline structures and organic matter. Their bodies rippled with colors that matched the surrounding terrain, and their multiple limbs ended in claws that could shear through metal. Most notably, they moved with the calculated precision of apex predators that had never known failure. "Fascinating adaptation," Storm observed, calmly documenting the creatures while maintaining a defensive position. "They've evolved to incorporate the local minerals into their biological structure. The crystalline components must help them handle the extreme conditions. They're also displaying pack hunting behaviors," Ice added, noting how the creatures were trying to flank them. "Sophisticated ones. These aren't mindless beasts." Raj watched as more of the creatures emerged from cover, their crystalline bodies refracting the 3 suns' light in mesmerizing patterns. "Well, team, looks like we get to demonstrate why humans top the food chain on a death world." The first attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, the crystal predators moving with devastating speed and coordination. To their surprise, their intended prey neither fled nor froze. Instead, the humans moved with their own practiced coordination, turning defense into offense with fluid efficiency. Tank met the largest creature head-on, using its own momentum against it in a move that would have made his judo instructor proud. The beast, easily weighing over a ton, found itself flying through the air to crash into one of its packmates. Both creatures shattered partially on impact, their crystalline components proving to be both strength and weakness. Ghost seemed to flow between attacks like water, her movements so precise that the predators kept striking empty air where she had been moments before. Their reaction time is good, she noted professionally, but they're too committed to each attack. No mid-motion adjustments. Storm and Ice worked in tandem, using the terrain itself against their attackers. A quick analysis of the crystalline structures had revealed resonant frequencies that, when struck correctly, could shatter the predator's partially crystalline bodies. They turned their survival knives into tuning forks, creating devastating effects with minimal effort. The crystalline component of their biology makes them vulnerable to harmonic disruption, Storm explained, almost apologetically, as another creature fell to pieces. Basic physics, really. What had started as an ambush by apex predators quickly turned into a demonstration of why humans were considered the most dangerous species on their own world. The crystal beasts found their every advantage countered, their hunting strategies dissected and defeated, their physical superiority turned against them. In the orbital observation post, the alien scientists watched in stunned silence as their instruments registered what was happening. The humans weren't just surviving an encounter that should have been lethal. They were analyzing, adapting, and overcoming with almost casual efficiency. They're treating it like a training exercise, one observer noted in disbelief. They're actually using this as an opportunity to study the creature's biology and behavior. Indeed, even as they defended themselves, the human team was gathering data. Storm was particularly interested in how the creatures had evolved to incorporate crystalline structures into their biology. Ice documented their hunting patterns for future reference. Ghost made detailed notes about their movement capabilities. Even Tank, while wrestling with a beast 3 times his size, was analyzing its biomechanical structure. The remaining predators finally withdrew, their pack hierarchy shattered along with several of their members. The humans watched them go with what almost seemed like disappointment. Well, that was educational, Raj said, helping Tank up from where he'd been analyzing a fallen creature's crystalline structure. Everyone good. Better than good, Ghost replied, excitement clear in her voice. Those were legitimate apex predators, evolved for one of the most hostile environments we've ever encountered. And we just showed them why humans are scarier. The real question, Ice mused, carefully storing samples he'd collected during the fight, is whether they're smart enough to learn from this encounter or if we'll have to demonstrate again. The answer came sooner than expected. As they continued their journey toward the Devastation Mountains, they noticed they were still being followed, but now at a respectful distance. The crystal predators had apparently reassessed humans' position in the local food chain. Look at that, Storm pointed out, noting how the creatures were now moving parallel to their course. They're actually adapting their behavior based on our encounter. That shows remarkable intelligence. They're also keeping other predators away from us, Ghost added, having noticed the absence of smaller threats. I think we just got adopted as the new apex predators in this territory. The realization added a new layer of satisfaction to their mission. Not only had they survived an encounter that should have been impossible by galactic standards, but they'd also earned the respect of creatures that had evolved in one of the universe's most lethal environments. As they approached the foothills of the Devastation Mountains, the weather began to change dramatically. The triple sun's light was increasingly obscured by roiling clouds that crackled with enough electrical energy to power a small city. The temperature, already extreme by most species standards, began to fluctuate wildly. Storm front moving in, Ice reported, studying the atmospheric conditions with professional interest. And when I say storm, I mean something that makes Earth's hurricanes look like gentle spring showers. Perfect timing, Raj noted, checking their heading one more time. We're about to start our mountain ascent. Might as well do it with some exciting weather to keep things interesting. Their crystal predator escorts stopped at the mountain's edge, somehow conveying both respect and relief that they didn't have to follow the crazy humans into what was coming. The humans, for their part, looked at the approaching meteorological nightmare with something approaching enthusiasm. You know, Tank said as they began their ascent, lightning bolts the size of skyscrapers painting the sky above them. I'm starting to think we might actually owe Commander Xylovax a thank you. This is turning out to be quite the entertaining field trip. The mountains loomed before them, their peaks lost in clouds that seemed to be composed of equal parts energy and malevolence. But where any sensible species would see an insurmountable obstacle, the humans saw just another challenge to overcome. After all, they had already proven themselves to the local apex predators. How much harder could a little weather be? The Devastation Mountains earned their name within minutes of the team beginning their ascent. Lightning bolts thick as buildings carved new valleys into the mountainside, while winds carrying metallic particles scored the rocks with hurricane force. The very air crackled with enough electricity to power a small civilization. Now this, Tank shouted over the howling wind, is what I call weather. He was using his height and mass to break the wind for the others, treating forces that could tear apart a small spacecraft as merely an interesting challenge. Storm had her basic atmospheric analyzer out, her eyes wide with scientific excitement. The electrical discharge patterns are creating new mineral formations in real time. The entire mountain range is literally rebuilding itself with every strike. A massive lightning bolt struck nearby, turning a section of the mountain into molten rock and causing a localized gravity fluctuation that briefly doubled their weight. The humans adjusted their stance and kept climbing, treating it as though it were nothing more serious than a change in workout intensity. Interesting adaptation opportunity, Raj called out, noting how the lightning was following patterns through the metallic deposits in the rock. We can use the mineral veins to predict where the next strikes will hit. Ghost was already plotting their route accordingly, her trained eye picking out safe passages through the chaos. If we time it right, we can use the gravity fluctuations to our advantage. When the strikes hit, they're actually creating momentary low-gravity pockets on the opposite side. The alien observers in orbit watched in continuing disbelief as their instruments registered conditions that should have been instantly lethal. The humans weren't just surviving. They were analyzing and exploiting the lethal environment as though it were a mildly interesting puzzle. They're using Class X lightning strikes as a navigational aid. One observer noted, their crystalline form flickering with patterns of confusion. They're treating atmospheric ionization levels that could fry a battleship's shields as a minor inconvenience. Higher up the mountain, the team encountered a new challenge. The constant electrical activity had created zones where reality itself seemed to warp, creating spatial distortions that bent light and matter in impossible ways. Reality distortion fields, Ice observed with professional interest, watching as rocks fell upward through one such stone. The electrical activity is actually warping local spacetime. Perfect. Storm grinned, already calculating trajectories. We can use these distortions to cover more ground. Watch this. She stepped into one of the warped zones and seemed to slide sideways through space, emerging 100 meters higher up the mountain. The others quickly caught on, turning what should have been an impossible obstacle into an impromptu transportation system. They began leapfrogging up the mountain, using the reality warps to bypass sections of treacherous terrain. You know, Tank commented as he emerged from a spatial distortion that had turned him briefly two-dimensional, I don't think this is quite what the commander had in mind when he sent us here to die. Probably not, Raj agreed, calculating the timing for the next warp jump. But you have to admire how the planet keeps trying to kill us in increasingly creative ways. The mountains seemed to take this as a challenge. The storm intensified, now firing lightning bolts that split into fractal patterns, turning the sky into a web of pure energy. The gravity fluctuations became more extreme, varying from near zero to crushing force in seconds. Rather than being deterred, the humans adapted. They developed a rhythm, timing their movements to the fluctuations in gravity and electrical activity. When the gravity increased, they used it for rapid descents. When it decreased, they made impossible leaps between safe zones. The lightning they treated as a light show, albeit one that could vaporize solid rock. Temperatures rising again, Ghost reported as they neared what appeared to be the summit. The electrical activity is ionizing the atmosphere. We're basically climbing through plasma now. Good thing we worked up a sweat getting here, Ice quipped, his uniform already showing signs of heat stress. Helps with the cooling. The summit, when they reached it, provided a view that would have struck terror into most species' hearts. The other side of the mountain range was a maelstrom of competing weather systems, where cyclones of plasma danced with tornadoes of crystalline shards. The extraction point was barely visible through the chaos, a tiny beacon of artificial stability in a sea of natural violence. Well, Raj said, taking in the view with what could only be described as anticipation, looks like the real fun is just starting. Anyone want to bet on whether we can ride one of those plasma cyclones down? Storm was already analyzing the patterns in the chaos. The plasma cyclones are creating updrafts that feed into the crystal tornadoes. If we time it right, we could use them as a transportation system. Now that's thinking like a human, Tank grinned, already removing unnecessary gear to improve his aerodynamics. Why climb down a mountain when you can surf down it on a wave of superheated plasma? The alien observers watched in horror as the humans began calculating jump trajectories into what their instruments registered as certain death. But by now, they were starting to realize that human definitions of certain death differed significantly from galactic standard. They're going to try to ride the plasma cyclones, one observer noted, their crystalline form pulsing with patterns of disbelief. They're actually going to try to use lethal atmospheric phenomena as a transportation system. Are you really surprised at this point? Another responded, their patterns showing resignation. They treated apex predators as study subjects and reality warps as shortcuts. Why wouldn't they try to surf on plasma? Back on the mountain, the human team was making final preparations for their descent. They had calculated the patterns in the chaos, identified the safest route through the maelstrom, and were now doing what humans did best, turning an impossibly lethal situation into an opportunity for adventure. Remember, Raj briefed his team. The plasma cycles every 30 seconds, the crystal tornadoes rotate counterclockwise, and the gravity fluctuations peak every 15 seconds. Time your jumps accordingly. And this should be just like that time we surfed the solar flares on Mercury. Only with better scenery, Ghost added, eyeing the swirling chaos below with anticipation. The extraction point's sensors registered the humans' approach long before they came into visual range. Not because they were being tracked, but because they were riding the leading edge of a plasma cyclone, using the superheated energy vortex like a cosmic surfboard. Commander Xylovax, who had arrived to personally witness what he assumed would be the retrieval of human remains, watched in stunned silence as his doomed test subjects emerged from the maelstrom of energy and crystalline debris, laughing and comparing notes about their descent. "Did you see the triple flip tank pulled through the crystalline tornado?" Ghost exclaimed, brushing off particles of what should have been flesh-dissolving plasma. "I didn't think someone that size could move so gracefully," says the woman who practically danced between lightning bolts. Tank rumbled good-naturedly, his uniform showing signs of their impossible journey, but his spirit clearly energized. "I thought Storm was going to stop mid-descent to take mineral samples." "I did, actually," Storm admitted, patting her pack. The plasma crystal interaction was creating some fascinating new compounds. "Our materials scientists back home are going to love this." Ice was already compiling their survival data, his expression showing professional satisfaction. "We've got enough research material from this survival test to write at least 3 doctoral theses, the biological adaptations of the crystal predators alone." "Squad, attention," Raj called out as they approached the extraction point, bringing his team to perfect military formation despite their slightly singed appearance. They snapped to attention in front of Commander Xylovax, whose crystalline form was displaying patterns that suggested his entire worldview was undergoing rapid reconstruction. "Mission completed, sir," Raj reported formally, though his eyes twinkled with barely suppressed amusement. "Team intact, significant scientific data collected, and..." He checked his basic timepiece, We're actually 42 minutes ahead of schedule. The commander's translator struggled to convey his mix of disbelief, amazement, and dawning realization. You treated a survival test in one of the most lethal environments known to the galaxy as a research opportunity. Well, we had to do something to pass the time, Ghost offered helpfully. It would have been a waste just to focus on survival when there was so much to learn. To pass the time, Xylovax repeated, his crystalline structure flickering rapidly. You traversed the Devastation Mountains, a range that has destroyed entire exploration fleets, and you were concerned about boredom. Storm perked up at this. There are destroyed ships up there. That explains some of the interesting alloy formations we found. I thought those plasma metal interactions looked artificial. The commander's form pulsed with patterns that suggested he was reaching some profound conclusions about humanity's place in the galactic order. The purpose of this test was to demonstrate the limitations of human adaptation capabilities, to show you that there are environments even your species cannot survive. Oh, Tank said, understanding dawning. Is that why you picked such a gentle training ground? You were trying to ease us into it. Gentle. The commander's translator actually crackled with emotion. Terminus X is classified as a Class X Deathworld. The combination of radiation, atmospheric conditions, and geological instability makes it one of the most hostile environments in known space. The humans exchanged glances that suggested they were trying very hard not to laugh. Sir, Raj said diplomatically, while we appreciate the challenging environment, you might want to reconsider your classification system. From a human perspective, Terminus X is more like he searched for the right words, an interesting outdoor recreation facility. Recreation. Hilvax's patterns showed he was having trouble processing this concept. The crystal predators alone have decimated entire special forces units. Oh, you mean our new friends? Ghost brightened. They're actually quite intelligent once you demonstrate proper apex predator etiquette. We got some fascinating behavioral data on their social structure. The commander's crystalline form dimmed slightly as he processed this information. When he spoke again, his tone had changed from disbelief to something approaching awe. We need to completely revise our understanding of human capabilities, and possibly our entire classification system for hostile environments. Happy to help with that, sir, Raj offered. We could provide detailed analysis of various environments from a human perspective, though you might want to find something a bit more challenging for the actual survival tests. As the team boarded the extraction vessel, Commander Xylovax watched them go with new understanding. He had set out to teach these humans about their limitations. Instead, they had taught the galaxy about the true meaning of adaptation and survival. In the ship's database, he began composing a new entry. Human Classification Update. Species demonstrates ability to not only survive but thrive in conditions previously considered universally lethal. Recommendation. Create new classification category for species that treat Deathworlds as recreational facilities. Note: further study needed to determine if there are alloy environments humans consider genuinely hostile. As the ship broke orbit, the human team was already planning their next adventure. You know, Tank mused, I heard the obsidian wastes on Pyrox Prime are nice this time of year. Constant meteor bombardment, rivers of liquid metal. Sounds perfect for a weekend getaway. Ghost agreed with a grin. Commander Xylovax's crystals flickered with what might have been resignation. The galaxy was about to learn some very interesting lessons about the species that called Earth, a death world by any other standard, their home. And somewhere in the Devastation Mountains, a pack of crystal predators watched the ship depart, already incorporating their encounters with humans into their species' memory. The galaxy's definition of apex predator would never be quite the same. The end.